Ollie never imagined that a leak in her apartment would change her life forever. When she accepted her best friend's invitation to stay with him temporarily, she thought it would just be a few days. But on the first morning, when she saw him stepping out of the shower wearing nothing but a towel, water droplets running down his defined chest, something inside her woke up. His eyes met hers. And in that second that lasted an eternity, they both knew. Their friendship had dangerous cracks, and maybe some delicious ones. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, also click the super thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us continue bringing stories that move you. The day had started with promise. Ollie Munro walked through the glass doors of Bennett & Associates with her head held high, wearing her best navy blue suit and the kind of confidence that came from years of hard work finally paying off. Her first day as an associate attorney at one of Seattle's most prestigious firms. She had rehearsed her introductions, prepared her answers, and even chosen a subtle perfume, something between jasmine and vanilla, that wasn't too bold nor too understated. The morning was intense. Meetings, presentations, new faces, firm handshakes. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the scent of new paper and polished wood filled the hallways. Everything seemed perfect, until the moment when, at 6 in the evening, she turned the key in her apartment lock. The door opened with a strange creak, and then chaos. Water everywhere. The carpet was soaked, the living room furniture displaced, swollen and warped books scattered across the floor. The ceiling was dripping in 3 different spots, creating a disturbing symphony of constant drips. The smell of mold and dampness immediately invaded her nostrils, suffocating and nauseating. "No, no, no, no," Ollie murmured, dropping her bag on the wet floor. Her eyes scanned the disaster. The bookshelf she had assembled herself was toppled over. The curtains, soaked, hung heavily. The painting her mother had given her as a graduation gift was on the floor, the frame broken, the canvas stained. Her hands trembled as she tried to process the scene. How had this happened? How long would it take to fix? Where would she sleep tonight? Panic rose through her throat like a hot, suffocating wave. She pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking fingers and dialed the number she knew by heart. 3 rings. Ollie. Theo Bennett's deep, warm voice filled the line, and for a second she almost broke down just hearing it. That voice had always had the power to calm her, since the first day they met in law school years ago. "Theo, Her voice failed. She swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "My apartment, it's destroyed, a leak. I don't know what to do." Silence on the other end. She could hear him breathing, processing, calculating. "Where are you right now?" His voice was firm, controlled, but there was something more there, an urgency disguised as calm. "Still here, at the door. Theo, everything's ruined." "Listen." He paused. She could imagine him running his hand through his dark hair like he did when he was focused. "Pack a bag, grab what you need for a few days, and come here." "Theo, I can't." "It's not charity, Ollie." His voice cut in, gentle but firm. "It's survival. You just started at the firm. You won't be able to focus if you're sleeping in some cheap hotel or on someone's couch. Come here. I have plenty of space." She closed her eyes, feeling resistance battle against relief. Accepting help had never been easy for her, but the truth was, he was right. And more than that, the idea of being near him, even in such chaotic circumstances, brought a comfort she didn't want to examine too closely. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." And then lower, almost a whisper, "I wouldn't let you be anywhere else." She felt something tighten in her chest. "Okay, thank you. You don't need to thank me. Just come." 2 hours later, Ollie stood in front of the building where Theo lived, a modern glass and steel structure, with a uniformed doorman and a lobby lit by minimalist chandeliers. She gripped the handle of her suitcase harder than necessary as the elevator climbed to the top floor. The apartment number gleamed discreetly on the dark wooden door, Penthouse 01. She took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. The door opened almost immediately, and there he was. Theo Bennett, CEO of the firm where she now worked. Her best friend since their college days, the man who knew her fears, her ambitions, her terrible jokes, and her obsession with iced coffee even in winter. But in that moment, under the soft light of the entrance hall, he looked different. He was wearing a simple grey t-shirt and black sweatpants, without the armor of impeccable suits, without the formal posture of the office, just Theo, hair slightly messy, barefoot, expression soft. And when his eyes met hers, something passed between them, something that lasted only a second but was felt to the bone. "Hey." His voice was softer now, almost intimate. "Hey." She tried to smile, but was sure she looked more tired than anything else. He stepped aside, holding the door open. "Come in, welcome." Ollie entered, pulling her suitcase behind her. The apartment opened before her like a revelation. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Seattle's skyline, glittering like an ocean of lights. The space was wide, modern, but welcoming. Dark leather sofas, wooden bookshelves, an open kitchen with a marble island. It smelled of cedar wood and something citrus, clean and masculine. "Theo, this is incredible." She turned to him, genuinely impressed. He shrugged, hands in his pockets. "It's just a place to sleep. It's a palace." He laughed softly, and the sound did something strange to her stomach. "Come on, I'll show you your room." She followed him down a wide hallway. He stopped in front of a door, opened it, and turned on the light. The room was spacious, with a king bed covered in pristine white sheets, a reading chair by the window, and even a small desk. Simple, but perfect. "Bathrooms there." He pointed to a side door. "Towels are in the cabinet. If you need anything, my room's at the end of the hall." She set her suitcase on the floor and turned to him. He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with an intensity she couldn't decipher. "Theo, seriously, thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." He was quiet for a moment, just looking at her. Then, slowly, he moved closer. He stopped a few steps away, close enough for her to feel the warmth emanating from him, the smell of the soap he used, something between mint and sandalwood. "You'll never need to find out." His voice was low, husky. "I'll always be here." Her eyes locked on his. There was something in that look, something she hadn't noticed before. Or maybe she had, but had always ignored. Something that made her heart beat faster and her breath catch in her throat. He raised his hand, hesitant, and lightly touched her shoulder. A brief touch, almost casual, but the electricity that passed through that contact wasn't casual. It was incendiary. "Get some rest." He stepped back, breaking the spell. "Tomorrow we'll figure everything out." She just nodded, unable to form words. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Ollie stood in the middle of the room, her heart still racing, the skin on her shoulder still tingling where he had touched her. Something had changed. She didn't know what. She didn't know when. But as she lay in bed and closed her eyes, a single certainty pulsed in her mind. This wouldn't be an ordinary temporary stay. Morning arrived wrapped in soft golden light that invaded the room through the translucent curtains. Ollie woke up disoriented for a moment, her brain still processing where she was. Then the memory returned, the destroyed apartment, the call to Theo, the unexpected move. She stretched in the soft bed, feeling the coolness of the Egyptian cotton sheets against her skin. The silence of the apartment was different from hers, deeper, calmer, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city below. Ollie got up and walked to the window. The view was breathtaking. Seattle stretched before her like a living chessboard, mirrored buildings reflecting the clear morning sky, the distant sound of horns and the constant movement of a city that never completely stopped. She looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. 7:15. She had time before needing to get ready for work. She decided to take a quick shower and then look for coffee. Hopefully, Theo had a decent espresso machine. 20 minutes later, she emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a pink silk robe she had brought in her suitcase. The fabric was light and slippery against her still damp skin, her loose hair falling in wet waves over her shoulders. Water droplets ran down the back of her neck, sliding down her back, leaving a cold and refreshing trail. She opened the bedroom door and headed toward the kitchen, the aroma of coffee already in the air. But then something made her stop. A door opened in the hallway. and Theo stepped out of the bathroom, wearing only a towel. Time seemed to slow down. She froze in the middle of the hallway, her bare feet glued to the dark wooden floor. He was just a few feet away, water still dripping from the dark hair that fell over his forehead. Drops slid down his defined chest, tracing slow and hypnotic paths over the tanned skin. Broad shoulders, muscular arms, the sharp jawline covered by stubble that made him even more attractive. The white towel was tied low on his hips, revealing his sculpted abdomen, each muscle defined under the still wet skin. Steam escaped from the bathroom behind him, enveloping him in an almost ethereal mist. He was distracted, running his hand through his wet hair, when he finally noticed her presence. His eyes met hers and stopped. Ollie felt the air leave her lungs. She couldn't look away. Her heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Her mouth was dry, her hands trembling. He watched her with the same intensity, his dark eyes scanning her face, moving down to her bare shoulders, to the silk robe that molded to her wet body, revealing curves in a way she had never allowed him to see before. The hallway seemed to have shrunk. The distance between them, once safe and respectful, now felt dangerously small. Theo was the first to recover. A slow, almost teasing smile curved his lips. "Good morning." His voice came out hoarse, deeper than normal, as if he too was fighting against something. Ollie tried to respond, but no sound came out. She cleared her throat, feeling her cheeks heat up. "Good. Good morning." He took a step toward her, just one, but it was enough to make her heart race even faster. "You're going to leave me like this, Ollie?" He tilted his head, his eyes shining with amusement and something deeper. "Not even a proper good morning?" She blinked, trying to process his words, while struggling to keep her eyes on his face and not let them wander to his still wet chest, to the drops slowly running down his skin. I already said good morning." Her voice came out weaker than she intended. "You did," he agreed, crossing his arms over his chest. The movement made the muscles in his arms contract. "But you were looking at me like you'd never seen me before." She swallowed hard, feeling the blush spread from her face to her neck. "I wasn't looking." "No?" He arched an eyebrow, clearly not believing her. "Then what were you doing? I was surprised you came out of nowhere." "From the bathroom," he corrected, amused. "I came out of the bathroom, in my apartment, after taking a shower. It's not exactly an ambush." She rolled her eyes, trying to regain some control over the situation. "You could have gotten dressed before coming out." "I was going to get dressed in my room." He pointed to the door next to the bathroom. "I didn't expect to have company in the hallway." The way he said company, low, almost intimate, made something tighten in her belly. They stood there in the silent hallway, the steam from the shower still floating in the air, the smell of soap and shampoo mixing with her perfume, jasmine and vanilla. Ollie realized her eyes had betrayed her promise to stay on his face. They slid, quickly but not quickly enough, over his chest, over his abdomen, before hurrying back up. He saw. Of course he saw. A slow and dangerous smile formed on his lips. "Ollie." He said her name like a caress, slowly, savoring each syllable. "What?" She tried to sound casual, but her voice came out too high-pitched. "You're looking at me again." "I'm not." "You are." He took another step, closer now, close enough for her to feel the warmth emanating from him, still heated from the hot shower. "And you know what? I don't mind." Her heart beat so hard she was sure it would explode. "Theo," she started, but didn't know how to finish the sentence. He tilted his head, his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that left her breathless. "How you look different too," he said low. "That robe, pink, looks good on you." She looked down, realizing for the first time how the wet silk clung to her body, revealing more than it should. Instinctively, she crossed her arms over her chest. I'm going to change." "You don't need to." The words came out quickly, almost urgently. He seemed to notice the tone and softened. "I mean, you're fine. You're at home. At home." The words echoed between them, loaded with a meaning neither dared to explore. Ollie felt the tension in the air like a taut rope, about to snap. She needed to get out of there. She needed to put distance between them before she did something stupid. I'm going to get coffee," she murmured, starting to move away. "Ollie." His voice stopped her. She turned reluctantly. He stood there, still in a towel, still wet, but his expression was different now, more serious, more intense. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't," she answered, too honestly. "You just made me confused." He opened his mouth as if to say something, but then seemed to think better of it. He just nodded slowly. "Okay." She turned and walked quickly toward the kitchen, feeling his eyes glued to her back until she turned the corner and disappeared from view. Only when she was alone in the kitchen, leaning against the cold marble island, did she allow her breath to come out in a shaky sigh. What the hell had just happened? They were friends. Best friends. Nothing more. But the looks they exchanged in that hallway, that wasn't friendship, that was desire. Raw, real, and impossible to ignore. And the scariest part? She didn't want to ignore it. Ollie had been in the kitchen for 10 minutes, trying to focus on anything other than the image of Theo stepping out of the bathroom. She had found the coffee machine, a gleaming Italian Nespresso, and made a steaming cup of double espresso. The strong, bitter aroma filled the air, but not even the caffeine could calm the turmoil in her chest. She held the hot cup between her hands, letting the heat slightly burn her palms as she looked out the window. The city was waking up below. Cars moved like organized ants. People rushed to their jobs, everything so normal, so predictable, unlike the chaos she felt inside. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her entire body stiffen. She didn't turn around. She didn't trust herself to keep her composure. "You found the coffee?" Theo's voice echoed behind her, closer than she expected. Ollie finally turned, prepared to see him, but nothing could have prepared her for that. Theo was dressed now, thank God, but in a way that was almost as devastating as the towel. He wore a light blue shirt, still without a tie, the first 3 buttons open, revealing a triangle of tanned skin. The sleeves were rolled up to his forearms, exposing defined muscles. The dark grey dress pants hugged his legs perfectly. His hair was combed back, still slightly damp, and his cologne, sandalwood, leather, and something citrus, invaded her senses like a warm wave. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, elegant, powerful, irresistibly attractive, and she was still in a pink silk robe with wet hair. "I did," she managed to reply, raising the cup as proof. "I hope you don't mind. My home is your home, Ollie." He approached the marble island, staying on the opposite side from her. Safe, respectful. But his eyes said something else. "But you're going to need more than coffee. Let me make breakfast." "You cook?" She arched an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. He smiled, that crooked smile that always undid her. "I have a few tricks up my sleeve." She watched as he moved through the kitchen with natural ease. He opened the refrigerator, taking out eggs, cheese, tomatoes, fresh basil. He grabbed a copper pan hanging from a rack above the stove. He lit the flame with a soft click. There was something hypnotic about the way he moved, confident, controlled. His large, skilled hands breaking the eggs with precision, beating them in a bowl, seasoning with salt and freshly ground pepper. "Sit." He pointed to the tall stools around the island. "Relax." Ollie obeyed, climbing onto the stool and crossing her legs. The robe slipped a little, revealing more thigh than she intended. She pulled the fabric quickly, but not before seeing his eyes slide down and back up. He said nothing, just returned his attention to the pan, where butter was already sizzling softly. The silence between them was thick, loaded with everything that wasn't being said. "Do you need help?" Ollie offered, more to fill the void than out of real necessity. "With the eggs?" He shot a sideways glance, amused. "I think I can manage." "No, with that." She pointed to his neck, where the dark grey tie hung, still untied. Theo stopped, looked at her, then at the tie. "Do you really want to be that close to me this time of morning?" The teasing was there, but there was something more underneath. A real question, a veiled challenge. Ollie felt the heat rise up her neck, but didn't back down. "It's just a tie, Theo." "Is it?" He turned off the heat, letting the eggs rest in the pan. Then slowly, he walked around the island until he stood in front of her. She was still sitting on the stool, which left them almost at the same height. eyes at the same level. "No escape." "It is," she repeated, but her voice came out less convinced. "Then help me," he said low, and extended the tie to her. Ollie took the soft fabric between her fingers, feeling the texture of the Italian silk. Theo took a step forward, positioning himself between her legs. Respectful but devastatingly close. She could feel his warmth, his smell, his breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she passed the tie around his neck and began to make the knot. She had seen her father do this 1,000 times. She had helped ex-boyfriends. It was a simple mechanical gesture. But with Theo, every movement felt erotic. She pulled the ends of the tie, adjusting the length. Her fingers brushed the collar of his shirt, lightly touching the warm skin of his neck. He swallowed hard. She saw the movement of his throat, his Adam's apple rising and falling. "You're trembling," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "I'm not." She lied, concentrating on the knot. "You are." He raised his hands and slowly held her waist over the silk robe. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but the electricity that passed through that contact was devastating. Ollie stopped breathing. His thumbs moved slightly, an almost imperceptible movement, caressing the curve of her waist through the thin fabric. She raised her eyes, meeting his. They were so close, noses almost touching. She could feel his breath against her lips. She could see the golden flecks in his brown eyes. She could count every eyelash, every laugh line near his eyes that showed he smiled a lot. "Theo," she whispered, not knowing if it was a plea for him to stop or to continue. "I know." He responded, as if he perfectly understood her confusion. Because he felt the same. Her fingers still held the tie, but she had completely forgotten what she was doing. All that existed was that moment, that microscopic space between their bodies. The tension that vibrated in the air like a violin string about to snap. "You're driving me crazy, Ollie," he admitted, his voice low and vulnerable in a way she had never heard before. "How? Since you walked through that door last night?" He continued, his eyes fixed on hers. "Since I saw you in that pink robe in the hallway. Since now, with your hands on my neck, so close that I could—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "Could what?" she asked, her voice coming out like a thread. He didn't answer, just looked at her lips, a lingering look, full of intention. Her heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. And then, as if remembering where they were, who they were, he took a small step back. His hands left her waist, leaving a cold emptiness where there had been warmth. "Done," Ollie said quickly, adjusting the tie with hurried movements. It's perfect." He looked down, touching the knot with his fingers. "Didn't really need a tie, actually," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Why not?" He raised his eyes back to her, and the smile that curved his lips was dangerous. "Because now all I'm going to be able to think about all day is you helping me take it off." The words hit her like a punch, direct, bold, loaded with promise. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Theo turned, returning to the kitchen as if he hadn't just turned her world upside down. "The eggs must be cold by now," he commented casually, turning on the heat again. "But still edible." Ollie sat there, her heart still racing, her hands still tingling from his touch, trying to process what had just happened. They had crossed a line, not with a kiss, not with explicit words, but with looks, with touches, with the tension that now filled every inch of the apartment. And she knew, with absolute and terrifying certainty, that there was no going back. They were falling, and neither seemed willing to hold on. The following days turned into a delicate and dangerous dance. Ollie and Theo developed a routine, superficially innocent, but loaded with a tension that grew with each shared hour. Every morning they had coffee together. Theo made scrambled eggs or pancakes, while Ollie made fresh orange juice. They talked about cases at the firm, about difficult clients, about the small victories of the previous day. But beneath each word, there was an undercurrent of unspoken desire. The evenings were even more intense. After long days at the office, where they maintained a careful professional distance, they returned to the apartment and let their armor fall. Theo took off his jacket and loosened his tie. Ollie traded high heels for soft slippers, and pulled her hair into a messy bun. And then, inevitably, they ended up in the kitchen. Cooking together became their sacred ritual. That Thursday night, Ollie was chopping onions on the wooden cutting board, while Theo sautéed garlic in a pan next to her. The smell of hot olive oil mixed with garlic perfumed the entire space, making her stomach growl with hunger. "Slower with the knife," Theo commented, glancing over. "You're going to cut your finger." "I know how to chop onions, thank you." She shot back, but slowed down anyway. He laughed softly, that deep sound that made her stomach flip in ways that had nothing to do with hunger. "Stubborn," he murmured. "Bossy." She returned. Theo moved closer, standing behind her, so close that she felt the warmth of his body against her back. He reached his hand over her shoulder, grabbing the salt shaker on the counter in front of her. "Excuse me," he said near her ear, his voice low and husky. Ollie froze. Her entire body shivered with the proximity. She could feel his breath brushing her neck, could smell his cologne, that intoxicating mix of sandalwood and something masculine that was uniquely his. He took longer than necessary to grab the salt shaker. His hips almost touched her back. She gripped the knife harder, fighting the urge to turn around and do something completely stupid. "Theo," she started, but didn't know how to finish. He was still there, too close, too warm. "You got the salt?" "I did," he agreed, but didn't move away. "But I think I forgot what I wanted it for." She felt his lips brush lightly, so lightly it could have been accidental, the curve between her neck and shoulder. A shiver ran the entire length of her spine. And then he pulled away, returning to his pan as if nothing had happened. Ollie stood there, paralyzed, her heart hammering against her ribs, trying to remember how to breathe. After dinner, they had a habit of watching movies. Or rather, of trying to watch movies. That night, they were on the huge grey leather sofa, a bowl of popcorn between them, a psychological thriller playing on the giant screen TV. But Ollie couldn't focus on the plot, because Theo was sitting too close, not right next to her. There was a respectful space between them, but every time he moved, every time he grabbed popcorn, every time he shifted position, his shoulder brushed hers. His thigh touched hers. Small touches. Accidental. Or not. She wasn't sure anymore. "Are you paying attention?" Theo asked suddenly. Ollie blinked, returning to reality. "What?" "To the movie." He turned his head to her, a smile playing on his lips. "You haven't said a word in the last 20 minutes. "I was paying attention." "Really? Then who's the killer?" She opened her mouth, closed it. She had no idea. Theo laughed, and the sound reverberated through his chest. He extended his arm, resting it on the back of the sofa behind her. Not touching her, but surrounding her in a way that made her entire body hyper-aware. "You're distracted," he observed, his voice low. "I'm not." "You are." He leaned a little closer. "And I know why." Her heart raced. "You do?" "I do." He raised his free hand and slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted, took a loose strand of her hair and tucked it behind her ear. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, but the effect was devastating. His fingers lingered for a second longer, lightly brushing her earlobe, trailing down the line of her jaw. Ollie forgot how to breathe, how to think, how to do anything but feel. "I like when you do that," she admitted, her voice coming out almost soundless. "I know," he responded, his eyes fixed on hers. "That's why I do it." They stayed like that for an infinite moment, looking at each other. The movie forgotten. The world forgotten. All that existed was that space between them, microscopic, electrified, dangerous. "Why don't you kiss me?" she asked before she could stop herself. The question hung in the air like a confession. His eyes darkened. His hand was still on her face, his thumb now caressing her cheek with a gentleness that made her want to cry. "Because," he began, his voice hoarse, "because if I kiss you now, Ollie, I won't be able to stop." "What if I don't want you to stop?" He closed his eyes as if her words physically hurt him. When he opened them again, there was a vulnerability there she had never seen before. "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do," she insisted, turning her body completely toward him. "I know exactly what I'm asking." Theo swallowed hard. His hand moved from her face to her neck, his long fingers gently wrapping around her nape. "Ollie!" It was a warning, a last effort at restraint. But then she leaned in, just a few inches, enough for their noses to touch. And it was Theo who pulled back, slowly, painfully. "Not yet," he said, his voice rough. "Not like this." She felt the rejection like a slap, cold, cutting. "Why?" Her voice trembled. "Because when I kiss you, and I will kiss you, it's going to be because neither of us can fight it anymore. Not because we're tired, not because it's convenient." He held her face with both hands, forcing her to look into his eyes. "It's going to be because there's no other choice, understand?" She nodded, mute, her heart broken and completely in love at the same time. The days continued like this, a sweet and slow torture. They shared the same space, breathed the same air, existed in the same orbit. And with each accidental touch, a brush of hands reaching for the same cup, a bump of shoulders in the hallway, a look that lasted too long over the breakfast table, the tension grew. Theo watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. His eyes followed her every movement, the way she bit her lower lip when she was focused, how she laughed with her head thrown back, how she twisted a strand of hair around her finger when she was nervous. And Ollie watched him too, the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was frustrated, how his jaw tightened when he was thinking about something serious, how his eyes lit up when she walked into the room. They were falling in love. Not suddenly, but slowly, piece by piece, touch by touch, look by look. And they both knew that when the dam finally broke, there would be no going back. They were playing with fire, and neither of them cared about the risk of getting burned. The sky over Seattle was heavy that Friday night. Dark, thick clouds accumulated on the horizon, swallowing the sunset in shades of gray and purple. The air was dense, electric, as if the atmosphere itself knew something was about to explode. Ollie came home, because that's how she already thought of Theo's apartment, as home, with tense shoulders after an exhausting day at the firm. A difficult client, impossible deadlines, and the constant distraction of knowing that Theo was just a few floors away. She dropped her bag on the entryway console, took off her heels with a sigh of relief, and followed the low sound of jazz music coming from the kitchen. Theo was there, his back to her, stirring something in a pot on the stove. He had changed from his suit into a simple grey t-shirt and dark jeans, barefoot, his hair slightly messy, as if he had run his hands through it several times. There was something so domestic, so intimate about that scene, that her heart squeezed. "I'm home," she announced, leaning against the doorframe. Theo looked over his shoulder, and the smile that lit up his face was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Hey." His voice was warm, soft. "Rough day?" "You have no idea." She entered the kitchen, the smell of tomatoes, garlic, and basil enveloping her like a hug. "What are you making?" "Homemade tomato sauce," he replied, returning his attention to the pot. "Thought I'd make pasta. Something comforting." Ollie approached, standing beside him, watching the red sauce bubble gently. Steam rose from the pot, carrying aromas that made her stomach growl. "Smells incredible," she murmured. Theo paused. He turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting hers. There was something different in his look that night, something more intense, more determined. "But I think that's you," he said low, his voice husky. Before she could process the words, he took a step back, leaving space between them. But the air was already charged. The sentence had already been spoken. Outside, the first thunder echoed, distant but promising arrival. They had dinner at the kitchen island, sitting side by side on tall stools. The pasta was perfect, al dente, covered with the rich aromatic sauce, sprinkled with freshly grated Parmesan cheese. They talked about their day, about cases at the office, about nothing and everything at the same time. But beneath each word was the tension, always present, always growing. The rain started as they finished eating, first just a gentle drumming against the floor-to-ceiling windows, then harder, more insistent. Lightning tore through the dark sky, illuminating the apartment in white, ghostly flashes. "I'll wash the dishes," Ollie offered, standing up and carrying the plates to the sink. "Let me do it." Theo started to get up, but she gently pushed him back onto the stool. "You cooked, I wash, it's only fair." He didn't argue, just watched her as she turned on the faucet, soaped up the sponge, and began washing the dishes with methodical movements. The sound of running water mixed with the rain outside. Jazz continued playing softly through the apartment's sound system. It was almost peaceful, until she felt his presence behind her. Theo approached in silence, so close that she could feel the warmth emanating from his body, his scent wrapping around her like a second skin. And then he did something that stole all the air from her lungs. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his large hands resting on her waist, gently pulling her against his chest. Ollie froze, her hands still submerged in the hot, soapy water, the plate forgotten. "Theo," she whispered, but didn't know if it was a protest or a plea. He didn't respond, just rested his chin on her shoulder, his warm breath brushing the curve of her neck. "You worked too hard today," he murmured near her ear. "You're tense." She was. Her shoulders were stiff, her back aching. But now, wrapped in his arms, all she felt was warmth, safety, and a desire so intense it hurt. "I'm fine," she managed to say, but her voice came out shaky. "You're not." He disagreed gently. One of his hands moved slowly up her ribs, stopping just below her breast, his thumb caressing her stomach through the thin fabric of her blouse. "You're killing yourself working. You need to rest." "Theo," she tried again, but he continued. His other hand moved up her arm, gently taking the plate from her hands and placing it back in the sink. Then he grabbed a towel, dried her hands with a tenderness that made her want to cry, and intertwined his fingers with hers. "You've worked enough for today," he said against her neck, his lips brushing the sensitive skin there. Ollie closed her eyes, her entire body trembling. Every nerve ending was on fire. Every breath was an effort. Slowly, as if he had all the time in the world, Theo turned her in his arms, and suddenly they were face to face, the sink pressing against her back, his body almost pressed against hers, his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that consumed her. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, raising one hand and caressing her cheek with the back of his fingers. "Sometimes I look at you and forget how to breathe." The words hit her like soft punches, each one true, each one dangerous. "You can't talk like that," she said, but there was no strength in her voice. "Why not?" "Because—" She hesitated, searching for reasons that made less and less sense. "Because we're friends." "We were," he corrected, his voice firm. "But you know as well as I do that we crossed that line days ago." He was right, of course he was. They had crossed the line the moment she walked through that door with a suitcase, maybe even before that. Theo took another step, eliminating the last inch of space between them. His chest pressed against hers. She could feel his heart beating, fast, strong, as uncontrolled as hers. He raised his other hand, now holding her face between his palms. His thumbs caressed her cheeks in slow, hypnotic movements. "Ollie," he said her name like a prayer. "Tell me you feel this too. Tell me it's not just me." "You know it's not just you," she admitted, her voice breaking. "You have to know. I need to hear it," he insisted, his eyes searching hers with devastating vulnerability. "I need to hear it from you." Outside, another thunder exploded, closer now. The rain beat hard against the windows, the wind howled, but inside the apartment, everything was still, suspended. "I feel it," she confessed, the words coming out like a sigh. "I feel it so much it hurts, Theo. So much that I can't think straight. So much that I wake up in the middle of the night and have to remind myself that I can't go to your room and—" He didn't let her finish. With a quick, almost desperate movement, he tilted his head. Their noses touched, their foreheads pressed together, their breaths mingled. 1 inch. That's all that separated them. A single inch. Ollie lifted her face, her lips parted, her heart exploding against her ribs. Theo lowered his head, eyes closed, surrendered. And then, crack! A thunder exploded. So loud, so close that the windows vibrated. The lights flickered. They pulled apart instinctively, just a few inches, but it was enough to break the spell. Theo let his hands drop, his shoulders tense, his breathing irregular. Ollie pressed her back against the sink, her legs shaking so much she was sure she would collapse if she wasn't supported. The silence between them was deafening. I need to, Theo began, but didn't finish. He just ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. Sorry, I shouldn't have. Don't apologize, she cut him off, her voice firm despite the tremor. Don't do that. He looked at her, really looked, and what she saw there almost knocked her down. Desire, fear, confusion, love, all mixed together, all raw. I can't ruin this, he said low. I can't ruin us. You won't ruin anything, she promised, though she wasn't sure if it was true. Theo nodded, but didn't look convinced. He took a step back, then another. Good night, Ollie, he said, and there was so much pain in those 3 words that she wanted to scream. And then he left the kitchen, leaving her alone with the sound of the rain, the echo of the thunder, and the phantom feeling of his lips that almost touched hers. Almost. Monday arrived loaded with a different kind of tension. The weekend had been strange. Ollie and Theo circling around each other like planets in careful orbits, never getting too close, never pulling completely away. Polite conversations. Contained smiles, touches avoided, both pretending the storm night hadn't happened, both failing miserably. Ollie entered the office at 8 in the morning, iced coffee in hand, trying to focus on the contracts she needed to review. The firm was busy, lawyers rushing from one side to the other, assistants carrying stacks of documents, phones ringing incessantly. She was at her desk, highlighting important clauses in a merger contract, when she felt a presence beside her. Ollie Monroe? A male voice, smooth and full of humor. She looked up and found a man she didn't know, tall, carefully styled blonde hair, bright blue eyes, confident smile. He wore a perfectly tailored light gray suit and held a brown leather briefcase. Yes, she responded, curious. James Carpenter, he extended his hand. New marketing director, started today. Ollie shook his hand, firm, professional. Nice to meet you. Welcome to Bennett and Associates. Thanks. He smiled more broadly, revealing perfect white teeth. I've heard great things about you. They say you're the best associate the firm's ever had. She laughed, picking up her coffee. I think you heard wrong. I just started here. So you're talented and modest. James leaned on her desk too casually. Rare combination. There was something in his tone, light, flirtatious, that left her slightly uncomfortable. But he seemed harmless, just friendly. Well, if you need anything, any questions about how things work around here, feel free to ask, she offered politely. I'll remember that, he said, his blue eyes fixed on her in a way that lasted a second longer than necessary. Actually, I was thinking, would you like to have lunch with me today? Meeting someone would be nice. And I heard you know the best places around. Before Ollie could answer, a voice cut through the air like a blade. She already has plans. Both turned. Theo stood a few feet away, his black suit impeccable, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on James with an intensity that would make anyone back down. James, however, just smiled. CEO Bennett, he greeted, extending his hand. James Carpenter, pleasure. Theo shook his hand, but it was brief, almost cold. Welcome to the team. Thanks. James seemed completely oblivious to the tension. I was just getting to know Ollie here. She seems like a great person. She is. Theo agreed, but his voice was tense. And she's very busy, so if you don't mind... The sentence hung in the air, unfinished but clear. James looked from Theo to Ollie, his smile finally wavering. Of course. We'll talk later, Ollie. He walked away, leaving a heavy silence behind. Ollie turned to Theo, her eyes wide. What was that? What? He feigned innocence, but his jaw was tight. You were rude to him. I was polite. You were cold. And no, I didn't have lunch plans. Theo stared at her for a long moment. Then, without saying a word, he turned and walked toward his own office. Ollie stood there, mouth open, confused and, if she was being honest, slightly annoyed. The day passed in a tense cloud. Ollie avoided Theo, and he seemed to avoid everyone. She saw him only in glimpses, crossing hallways, entering meeting rooms, always with that closed expression she knew so well. He was angry. But why? James, on the other hand, was nothing but friendly. He stopped by her desk twice, made jokes about the broken coffee machine, offered help with a complicated case. He was charming, attentive, funny. And Ollie noticed, with growing discomfort, that every time James appeared, Theo showed up right after. Watching. Tense. Like a predator guarding territory. At the end of the afternoon, when most of the staff had already left, Ollie decided to confront him. She knocked on his office door, a huge room on the top floor with a panoramic view of the city, dark wood furniture and shelves full of legal books. "Come in." Theo's voice sounded from inside. She opened the door. He was sitting behind his desk, tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, one hand running through his messy hair. He looked exhausted and irritated. "We need to talk." Ollie closed the door behind her. Theo looked up, his expression closing even more. About you acting like a jealous idiot all day." The words came out harsher than she intended, but they were true. Theo was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up, his hands resting on the desk, the muscles in his forearms contracting. "I wasn't jealous," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You weren't." She crossed her arms. "Then why were you watching me every time James came near?" "I wasn't watching you." "Yes, you were." She took a step forward. "And you know what, Theo? You don't have the right." Something passed across his face. Pain, anger, frustration. "I know," he admitted low. "Then why?" "Because when you smile at him, Ollie." Theo interrupted her, his voice rising. He came around the desk, approaching her with firm steps. "When you laugh at his jokes, when you accept his attention like it's the most normal thing in the world, I feel like I'm losing you without ever really having you." The words hit her hard. Raw. Honest. Devastating. She swallowed hard, her heart racing. "Theo, I know I don't have the right," he continued, stopping just one step away from her. "I know I'm the one who pulled back that night. I know I was a coward. But seeing another man looking at you the way I look at you, talking to you like he has a chance, it drives me crazy." "He doesn't have a chance," Ollie said firmly. Theo stopped. His eyes searched hers, vulnerable. "He doesn't." "No." She took a step forward, eliminating the distance. "How could he, Theo? How could anyone when all I see is you?" She saw the exact moment his defenses crumbled, the way his shoulders relaxed, how his breath came out in a shaky sigh. "Ollie," he raised his hand, touching her face as if she were something fragile. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I'm already fighting so hard to control myself," he admitted, his voice rough. "And when you say things like that, it becomes impossible." She held his wrist, keeping his hand against her face. "Then stop fighting." His eyes darkened. His breathing became irregular. "You don't know what you're asking." "I do," she insisted, rising on her tiptoes. "I know exactly." Theo closed his eyes, his forehead pressing against hers. "If I kiss you now, if I really cross this line, there's no going back, Ollie. I won't be able to let you go." "Then don't let me go." She whispered against his lips, and for a second, one perfect second, she thought he was going to do it. But then he pulled back, his breathing heavy, his fists clenched. "Not here," he said, his voice hoarse. "Not like this. You deserve more than a rushed kiss in my office." She wanted to scream in frustration, but there was also something incredibly sweet about the way he was protecting her, even from himself. "Then when?" she asked, vulnerable. He held her face with both hands, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Soon," he promised. "Very soon. Because I can't take this anymore, Ollie. I can't keep pretending I don't want you with every part of me." And in those words, in that raw and honest promise, Ollie knew the wait was ending. And when it finally ended, their world would change forever. The ride back to the apartment was silent. Ollie and Theo shared the elevator with two other executives, maintaining a respectful distance, exchanging only furtive glances that said everything they couldn't verbalize. But the tension was palpable. It vibrated in the air between them, like a violin string stretched to its limit, about to snap. When they finally entered the apartment, the door closing behind them with a soft click, the silence became deafening. Theo dropped his briefcase near the console, loosened his tie, took off his jacket and hung it carelessly on the back of the sofa. His movements were tense, too controlled, as if he were fighting something internal and losing. Ollie let her bag fall to the floor, took off her shoes, and simply watched him. Her chest rising and falling with irregular breaths, her hands trembling slightly, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Theo walked to the kitchen without saying a word, opened the refrigerator, grabbed a bottle of water, drank half of it in one gulp. His broad back was tense under his white shirt, his shoulders rigid. He was running, again, and Ollie was tired of running. "Theo," she called, her voice firm. He stopped, didn't turn around, just stood there, his back to her, his hands resting on the counter, his head down. "Ollie, don't," he said low. "Please." "Don't what?" She took a step toward the kitchen, then another. "Don't talk, don't feel, don't want. Don't make this harder than it already is." His voice was hoarse, almost broken. "Why are you fighting this so hard?" she asked, stopping at the kitchen entrance. "Why won't you let me love you?" He finally turned around, and the expression on his face destroyed her. Pain, desire, fear, all mixed in an overwhelming intensity. "Because I'm afraid," he admitted, raw. "I'm afraid that if we start this, if we really cross this line, and it goes wrong, I'll lose you. And losing you, Ollie, that would kill me." Tears burned in her eyes, but she held them back, took another step. "What if it goes right?" she asked softly. "What if it's the best thing that ever happened to us?" "What if it's not?" he returned, the vulnerability naked in his voice. "Then we face it together." She took the last step, standing in front of him, so close she could feel the warmth emanating from him, the smell of his cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine. "But you can't ask me to pretend I don't feel what I feel. You don't have the right to be jealous if you're not going to do anything about it." His eyes closed, his jaw tightening. "You don't understand," he whispered. "Then explain it to me." She placed her hands on his chest, feeling his racing heart beneath her palms. "Make me understand." Theo opened his eyes, and what she saw there stole all the air from her lungs. Love, pure, intense, devastating. "Ollie," he held her wrists but didn't push her hands away, just held them there against his heart. "You're the only thing I've seen since you walked through that door carrying a suitcase. You're the first thought when I wake up and the last before I sleep. You're in every breath, every beat of my heart, and it terrifies me because I've never felt anything like this for anyone." A tear escaped, sliding down her cheek. "Me too," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I've never felt anything like this either." Something broke inside him. She saw it happen, the last wall crumbling, the last defense collapsing. "Then let me show you," he said, his voice rough and urgent. "Let me show you how much you mean to me." Before she could respond, Theo pulled her against him. One hand gripped the back of her neck, fingers threading through her hair. The other wrapped around her waist, pressing their bodies together. And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't hesitant. It was explosive. His lips captured hers with desperate hunger, a need that had been contained for days, weeks, maybe years. He kissed her like a thirsty man drinking water for the first time, as if she were oxygen and he was drowning. Ollie melted against him, her hands moving up his chest over his shoulders, burying themselves in his hair. She pulled him closer, impossibly so, responding to the kiss with the same intensity, the same urgency. Their tongues met, exploring, tasting, memorizing. He tasted of coffee and mint and something uniquely him that left her dizzy. Theo turned her, pressing her against the kitchen counter. His body covered hers, large and warm and solid. She felt every muscle, every line, every beat of his heart against hers. He kissed the corner of her mouth, the line of her jaw. He moved down her neck, his teeth gently nibbling the sensitive skin, his tongue tracing paths that made her moan softly. "Theo," she gasped, her head falling back, giving more access. "I know," he murmured against her skin. "I know, love." Me too. The word love hit her hard. Sweet and perfect. She pulled his face back to hers, capturing his lips in a deep, lingering kiss. A kiss that said everything words couldn't. I want you, I choose you, I love you. Theo groaned against her mouth, the sound reverberating through his chest. His hands moved down her back over the curve of her waist, over her hips, pulling her even closer against him. She felt the evidence of his desire pressed against her, and a liquid heat spread through her entire body. Bedroom, she managed to say between kisses. Theo, bedroom. He didn't need to hear it twice. In one fluid motion, he picked her up. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck, never breaking the kiss. Theo carried her through the apartment, stumbling slightly on the coffee table, bumping his shoulder on the doorframe but not stopping, not letting go, just holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. When they reached his bedroom, large, dark, smelling of him, Theo laid her gently on the bed. Her head sank into the soft pillows. His body covered hers immediately, his mouth finding hers again. Are you sure? He asked, pulling back enough to look into her eyes. Because if you're not, we stop now. No matter how much I want you, it has to be what you want. Ollie held his face between her hands, her heart overflowing. I want you, she said, clear and firm. I want you so much it hurts. Touch me like I'm yours. His eyes darkened even more. He lowered his head, his lips brushing hers. You are mine, he promised, his voice husky and possessive. You always were. I was just too much of an idiot to realize it. And then he kissed her again and the world around them disappeared. There was no more fear, no more doubt. There was only them, finally, completely. And when their bodies met, when they became one, it wasn't just physical, it was a promise, a vow, a silent commitment. Forever. The kiss deepened, more and more urgent, more necessary. Theo held Ollie's face between his hands, his thumbs caressing her cheeks, while his mouth explored hers with a reverence that made her tremble. You're so beautiful, he murmured against her lips, his voice husky and loaded with emotion. So perfect. Ollie couldn't form words. She just pulled him closer, her hands sliding over his shirt, feeling the tense muscles beneath the fabric. She wanted more. She needed more. As if reading her thoughts, Theo pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. The soft light from the bedside lamp cast golden shadows over his face, making him even more handsome. His dark eyes shone with desire and something deeper. Love, raw and honest. May I? He asked quietly, his hands going to the buttons of her blouse. She nodded, unable to speak, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Slowly, torturously slowly, Theo began to unbutton her blouse. One button at a time, his fingers brushing the exposed skin with each movement, his eyes fixed on hers, watching every reaction, every tremor, every sigh. When the last button was opened, he slid the blouse off her shoulders, letting the fabric fall on the bed. Ollie was there, vulnerable, wearing only her black lace bra and tailored skirt. Theo stopped for a moment, simply looking. The admiration on his face was palpable, as if he were seeing something sacred. Are you real? He whispered, almost to himself. Ollie felt her cheeks warm under his intense gaze. Theo. He lowered his head, his lips meeting her bare shoulder. He kissed there, soft and reverent, then moved down, leaving a trail of kisses along her collarbone, down her neck, over the curve of her breast. She arched her back, a low moan escaping her lips. His hands slid down her back, finding the clasp of her bra. He hesitated, his eyes seeking hers again. Yes, she answered the unasked question. Yes, Theo. He opened the clasp with a skillful movement. The bra slid down her arms, falling forgotten beside them. And then she was there, exposed, vulnerable, completely his. Theo pulled back slightly, his eyes traveling over every inch of her. Perfect, he murmured. You're absolutely perfect. Ollie reached out, pulling his shirt from his pants. Your turn, she said, her voice coming out husky. He smiled, that slow, dangerous smile that left her breathless, and stood up briefly. With quick movements, he unbuttoned his shirt and took it off, throwing it on the floor unceremoniously. And Ollie forgot how to breathe. She had already seen him in a towel. She had already seen the muscles, the tanned skin. But now, with him there, under the soft light, just for her, it was different. His broad, defined chest rose and fell with irregular breaths. His shoulders were wide, his arms muscular. A thin trail of hair descended from his sculpted abdomen, disappearing beneath the waistband of his pants. "Come here," she asked, extending her hands. He returned to the bed, covering her body with his. The sensation of skin against skin, bare and warm, drew a simultaneous sigh from both of them. Theo kissed her again, deep and lingering. His hands now explored with more freedom, sliding over her ribs, over her waist, over her hips, memorizing every curve, every line, every part of her. "Touch me," Ollie asked against his lips, her voice trembling. "Please, Theo, touch me." He groaned low, the sound reverberating through his chest. His hand moved up, delicate but firm, caressing her breast. His thumb brushed the hardened nipple, and she arched against him, a moan escaping. "Like this?" he asked, his mouth moving down her neck. "Yes," she gasped. "Exactly like that." Theo lowered his head, his mouth enveloping her nipple. His tongue traced slow circles while his hand massaged her other breast. Ollie buried her fingers in his hair, holding him there, lost in the sensations consuming her. He alternated between one breast and the other, worshipping each with his mouth, with his hands, with a devotion that made her feel precious, loved. Her hands explored his back, feeling the muscles contract under her touch. She moved down his back, over his shoulders, over his defined abdomen until she reached the waistband of his pants. "May I?" she asked, echoing his earlier question. "You can do whatever you want with me." He responded, his voice rough. "Anything, Ollie, always." She opened the button, pulled down the zipper. He moved away just long enough to remove his pants and underwear, standing completely naked before her. Ollie swallowed hard. He was beautiful. Every part of him. Strong, masculine, and completely hers. Theo returned to the bed, his hands sliding over her skirt. "May I?" he asked again, always respectful, always careful. "Yes." She lifted her hips, making it easier. He removed the skirt slowly, then the lace panties, leaving her completely naked. For a moment they just looked at each other. Two naked bodies, two exposed souls. No defenses, no masks. "You're everything to me," Theo said, his voice breaking slightly with the intensity of emotion. "Everything, Ollie." Tears burned in her eyes. "Show me," she asked. "Show me." He lay over her, the delicious weight of his body pressing her against the mattress. Her legs opened, accommodating him. They fit perfectly, as if they had been made for each other. Theo kissed her again, deep and slow, while his hands slid between their bodies. He touched her there, where she was warm and ready, and she moaned against his mouth. "Are you ready for me?" he asked, his fingers exploring, caressing, preparing. "Yes," she gasped. "Yes, Theo, please." He positioned himself, his eyes fixed on hers. "Look at me," he asked. "I want to see you. I want to see everything." And then slowly, careful, reverent, he entered. Ollie held her breath, her eyes wide. The sensation of being filled by him, of becoming one, was overwhelming. Perfect. "Are you okay?" he asked, still giving her time to adjust. "Am I hurting you?" "No." She held his face between her hands. "You're completing me." Something shone in his eyes. Pure emotion. And then he began to move. Slowly at first. Slow and deep movements. Their bodies finding a perfect rhythm. An ancient and new dance at the same time. "Don't stop looking at me," she asked, echoing his words. "I'll never stop," he swore, his eyes fixed on hers as he moved. "Never, love." The pleasure grew, a wave rising slowly. Ollie wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper. He groaned, the rhythm accelerating. "Theo," she gasped, feeling herself reach the edge. "I know." He kissed her, deep. "I'm here. Let go. Let me feel you." And she did. The wave hit her hard, tearing a cry from her lips. Her body trembled, tightening around him, taking him along. Theo followed seconds later, her name a hoarse whisper against her lips. He filled her completely, their bodies convulsing together, lost in each other. Afterward, when their breathing calmed and their heartbeats returned to normal, Theo wrapped her in his arms, pulling her against his chest, their bodies still intertwined, sweaty, satisfied, complete. "You're everything to me," he repeated, kissing the top of her head. Ollie smiled against his chest, her heart overflowing. "I've waited my whole life for this," she confessed. "Me too." He held her tighter, and it was worth every second of waiting. And there, in each other's arms, they finally understood. It wasn't just desire, it wasn't just attraction. It was love, true, deep, eternal. And they would never be alone again. Morning arrived soft and golden, the first rays of sun breaking through Theo's bedroom curtains and painting stripes of light over the intertwined bodies in the bed. Ollie woke slowly, consciousness returning in layers. First, the warmth, then the scent, sandalwood and something masculine that was uniquely his, and then the sensation of Theo's heavy arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her against his chest. She opened her eyes slowly. She was lying with her back to him, their bodies fitting perfectly, legs intertwined, his breath brushing the back of her neck in regular comforting intervals. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. And then panic arrived. What had they done? Not that she regretted it, God no. The previous night had been the most incredible of her life. Every touch, every kiss, every whisper in the dark had been perfect. Theo had been perfect. But now, under the harsh light of morning, reality settled like a weight on her chest. They had crossed the line, there was no going back. And what if this didn't work? What if they had ruined years of friendship for one night of passion? Theo's arm tightened around her, as if he sensed the growing tension in her body even while sleeping. "Come back to me," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "I can feel you running away." Ollie closed her eyes, her heart tight. "Theo, don't." He gently turned her in his arms, forcing her to face him. His eyes were still half closed, his hair messy, the stubble making him even more attractive. "Don't do this. Don't run from me." "I'm not running." She lied, but her voice trembled. Theo studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes reading every emotion on her face. Then he sighed, his hand moving up to caress her cheek. "You're scared." It wasn't a question. She nodded, small and vulnerable. "What if we ruined everything?" "We didn't ruin anything," he said firmly. "We finally got it right." "How do you know?" The words came out almost as a whisper. "How can you be so sure?" Theo moved closer, his forehead pressing against hers. "Because I love you, Ollie. Not since yesterday, not since last week. I think I've loved you since the first day I saw you in college, arguing with that idiot professor about international jurisdiction." Her heart stopped, then exploded. "You love me?" She could barely believe the words. "So much it hurts," he admitted, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "So much that waking up every day and pretending we were just friends was slowly killing me." Tears burned in her eyes. "Theo, I know you're scared." He continued, his voice soft but firm. "I am too. But I'll tell you something. I'd rather lose you trying than live the rest of my life wondering, what if?" The words hit her like a punch to the chest, painful and perfect at the same time. "I love you too," she confessed, the tears finally falling. "So much it scares me, because if this goes wrong, Theo, I lose you. And I don't know if I can survive that." He held her face between his hands, his thumbs wiping away the tears. "Then let's make it work," he promised, "together, with everything we have." She wanted to believe. God, how she wanted to. But the fear was still there, a tight knot in her chest. "I need to think," she said, gently pulling away. "I just need some time." The pain that crossed his face was like a stab, but he nodded, respecting her space. "Okay," he said low. "How much time do you need?" "I don't know," she admitted, already getting up from the bed. looking for her clothes scattered across the floor. "I just need to process all of this." Theo stayed quiet while she dressed hurriedly. When she was ready, he finally spoke. "Ollie." She stopped at the door without turning around. "I'll be here when you're ready, no matter how long it takes." She nodded, unable to speak, and left. The following hours were a blur. Ollie left the apartment, didn't take her suitcase, just her purse, and walked through the streets of Seattle without a destination. The city woke up around her, people rushing to work, coffee shops opening, the smell of fresh bread in the air. But she barely noticed. Her mind was a whirlwind. Images from the previous night mixed with fears about the future. The sensation of his hands on her skin, the sound of his voice saying he loved her, the paralyzing fear of losing the most important person in her life. She walked to Pike Place Market, watching vendors set up their stalls. She bought a coffee she didn't drink. She sat on a bench overlooking the bay and just existed. Hours passed. The sun rose in the sky. People came and went. And then, when the clock struck 3 in the afternoon, she finally understood. The fear would never completely go away. Loving someone, really loving, was risking being destroyed if things went wrong. But not loving Theo, not trying, that would be the real tragedy. She stood up, her heart finally certain, and ran. When Ollie entered the apartment, Theo was in the living room, sitting on the sofa, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. He looked up when he heard the door, and the expression of relief mixed with pain almost knocked her down. He was suffering because of her. "Ollie." He started to stand, but she ran to him and fell to her knees in front of him. "I'm sorry," she said, tears already falling. "I'm sorry for running away, for doubting us." Theo held her face immediately, wiping the tears with his thumbs. "No, you don't have to apologize. You had every right to be scared." "I'm still scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I'm terrified, Theo, because if this works, I'm going to love you so much it might hurt. But if it goes wrong, I lose you, and I don't know how to live without you." He pulled her into his lap, holding her tight against his chest. "Then let's try," he said against her hair, "with everything we have, and if it hurts, we face it together. If it goes wrong, and it won't, we deal with it together. But at least we tried." She lifted her face, looking into his eyes through the tears. "Are you sure? Are you sure it's worth the risk?" He smiled, small, soft, full of love. "Ollie, you are the risk worth taking. You always were." And then she kissed him, not with the urgency of the previous night, but with something deeper, a promise, a commitment. "We'll try, with everything." When they separated, Theo held her face between his hands. "I love you," he said, "and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it was worth it for you to come back." "I love you," she responded, "and I'll never run away again." And there, in each other's arms, they made a choice. They chose love. They chose the risk. They chose each other, and maybe love was always like that, scary, uncertain, dangerous. But with the right person, it was worth every second of fear, because in the end, loving and being loved was the only thing that really mattered. 6 months later, Theo's apartment had completely transformed, not just in the decor, although now there were colorful pillows on the sofa, photos of the two of them scattered across the shelves, and plants that Ollie insisted on keeping alive, but in the energy. The space that used to be just his was now theirs. Mornings had become Ollie's favorite time, waking up wrapped in Theo's arms, the sun coming in softly through the window, the smell of coffee that he always made before she woke up. Small rituals that had become sacred. That particular Sunday morning, Ollie woke up alone in bed. She found it strange for a moment, until she heard the low sound of music coming from the living room. She smiled, put on one of his t-shirts, which went down to mid-thigh, and left the bedroom. Theo was in the kitchen, his back to her, making breakfast. He wore only gray sweatpants, his torso bare, the muscles in his back moving smoothly as he stirred something in a bowl. Ollie leaned against the doorframe, just watching. It was still surreal sometimes. Having him. As if sensing her gaze, Theo turned his head. a slow smile lighting up his face. "Good morning, sleepyhead." "Good morning." She approached, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her face against his back. "What are you doing?" "Pancakes," he replied, turning in her arms to face her. His eyes traveled over her body in his t-shirt, and his smile widened. "And you wearing my clothes? My favorite combination." She laughed, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. "You say that every time." "Because it's true every time." He stole another kiss. "But today is special." "So go sit down and let me spoil you." Ollie frowned, curious. "Special why?" "You'll see." He winked, mysterious. After breakfast, which was delicious as always, Theo took her hand. "Come with me." He guided her to the balcony. Ollie didn't come here often. The view was beautiful, but the wind could be strong. But today the air was calm, the sun shining softly, Seattle stretching before them like a perfect picture. Theo stopped near the railing, still holding her hand. He looked nervous, which was strange because Theo never got nervous. "Are you okay?" she asked, touching his face. He laughed softly, taking her hand and kissing her fingers. "I am. Just nervous." "Why?" He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on hers. "Ollie, do you remember when you came to live here? It was supposed to be temporary. A few days, maybe weeks, until your apartment was fixed." She nodded, confused about where he was going with this. "But you never left," he continued, a smile playing on his lips. "And I never wanted you to leave, because from that first night when you walked through that door with a suitcase, I knew." "Knew what?" she asked, her heart starting to race. "That you were my person," he said simply. "That no matter how many days, weeks, or months passed, I would always want you here, with me, forever." The words hit her like a wave, sweet and overwhelming. "Theo," she started, but he gently interrupted her. "Let me finish," he asked, and there was a vulnerability in his voice she rarely heard. "These last 6 months have been the best of my life. Waking up with you, sharing breakfast, coming home knowing you're here, cooking together, sleeping with you in my arms. All of this is everything I always wanted but never knew I needed." Tears began to burn in her eyes. "And I don't want this to end," he continued. "I don't want it to be temporary. I don't want to live with the uncertainty of tomorrow. I want to wake up every day for the next 50 years knowing that you're mine, officially." And then slowly, he let go of her hand and got down on one knee. Ollie covered her mouth with her hands, tears already falling freely. Theo pulled a small velvet box from his sweatpants pocket. He opened it, revealing a delicate ring, a sparkling oval stone in white gold, simple but absolutely perfect. "Ollie Monroe," he said, his voice firm despite the evident emotion. "You came to stay for a few days. But I want you to stay forever. Marry me. Make me the happiest man in the world and say you'll spend the rest of your life with me." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she saw was him, kneeling, vulnerable, offering his heart in such a raw and honest way that it broke and healed her at the same time. "Yes." The word came out in a whisper through the tears. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." The smile that lit up his face was like the sun rising. He stood up quickly, taking the ring from the box and sliding it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like everything with them. And then he pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning while she laughed through her tears. When he finally put her back on the ground, she held his face between her hands and kissed him. Deep, long, full of promises. "I love you so much," she said against his lips. "So much I can't even put it into words." "Then show me," he said, echoing his words from the first time they gave themselves to each other. "Show me every day for the next 50 years. 100, she corrected, smiling. "For the next 100 years. He laughed, that deep, beautiful sound she would never tire of hearing. "Deal." They stood there on the balcony, embraced, looking at the city under the soft morning light. The ring sparkled on her finger, a solid promise of a future together. "You know what's funny?" Ollie said quietly. "What?" "If my apartment hadn't flooded, none of this would have happened. We would have stayed just friends, too scared to take the risk." Theo kissed the top of her head. Then I think we owe a thank you to that catastrophic leak. She laughed, snuggling closer against him. Definitely. They stayed silent for a moment, just enjoying each other's presence. And then Theo spoke, his voice soft, but full of conviction. You were supposed to be temporary, Ollie, but you became my forever. And I wouldn't trade that for anything in this world. She lifted her face, her eyes meeting his. Me neither. You're mine forever, Theo Bennett. And you're mine, he responded, sealing the promise with a kiss. And there, under Seattle's blue sky, with the city witnessing below, two souls who almost let fear win chose love, chose courage, chose each other, and they lived happily ever after, not because it was easy, but because they decided it was worth fighting for. Every single day. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the most unlikely places. A flooded apartment, a last-minute invitation, a friendship that always carried something deeper between the lines. Ollie and Theo proved that true love isn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It's about two people choosing each other daily, even with fear, especially with fear, because loving is risking. It's giving yourself completely and trusting that the other person will hold your heart with the same care that you hold theirs. And maybe that's the most beautiful lesson of all. That love doesn't happen despite fear, but through it. That the best person is the one who makes you want to be brave. And that sometimes the home we're looking for isn't a place, it's a person. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, also click the Super Thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us continue bringing stories that move you.